And then in 2019, my family had a crop insurance agency, and I joined the agency. I liked working with farmers and ranchers to manage risk, and the USDA's rolled out with so many new products in the last 10, 20 years to help farmers manage risk. I felt I could do them a lot of good just promoting those products and helping position them. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. Pat says I'm a farmer and a rancher. I would say I'm a weekend farmer and rancher. So our operation's pretty small, and it's just kind of a way to keep my foot in the business and understand what you guys go through on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to run through LRP tonight. And Pat mentioned take my phone number and or go to our website at insureag.com. If you have any interest or any questions, you can always contact me via text or call me or send me a note from our website. But I'm going to keep this really focused, livestock risk protection focused on feeder cattle tonight. You can also do fed cattle. You can also do swine. I'm just going to focus on feeder cattle tonight. And I can answer questions on any of the others off or at the end of the meeting. But for those of you that are new to livestock risk protection, it's a price protection tool. It provides protection from a decline in price while leaving the upside completely open for higher prices. So this is important because a lot of times I think people think I'm not ready to lock in a price yet because I think it's going higher. Well, the good news is with LRP, you get the higher price if it goes higher. So it's just a tool to put a floor in. I'm going to go through some of the real basics, but it's important you know this stuff so that you can see how the products are structured. For feeder cattle, there's quite a few different categories. They keep adding a few, it seems like every couple of years. But the ones I'm going to focus on tonight are the top three, really. And you'll see I got an asterisk here on unborn bulls and heifers. So I think with today's market structure and with the prices we have today, some of our biggest risk is looking down the road a ways, a year out. And with LRP, you can now get out to your next year's new crop herds, or feeders. So I'm talking like October, November, December, you can now start putting protection on clear out there. And those are the ones I'm most focused on with customers to get protected. However, I know there is risk on this year's crop too. We obviously have seen that in the last few weeks. And so unborn bulls and heifers are the calves that haven't been born yet, straight out of the cow, going to be born here this spring, let's say March, April, May, sometime in that time frame, or anything that's unborn. Next category is steer weight 1 and steer weight 2, which steer weight 1s are from 100 pounds up to 599 pounds, or from 600 pounds to 1,000 pounds. Same with heifers. And then down here, you've got miscellaneous other categories that I won't jump into. This one here you'll see is a new category, unborn calves. And this is for somebody that's, let's just say a dairy that's selling their calves right off the cow. So up to 100 pounds that are going to be born. So the periods that when you're purchasing LRP, you're picking a certain period that you want to lock up protection for. So let's say like today, you wanted to sign up for 13-week out, that'd put you into the March timeframe, end of February, March. And I'll run through a quote in a little bit, but you can go anywhere from 13 to 52 weeks out from the current timeframe, current day. Cattle can be sold either side of that end date. So you can sell them up to 60 days ahead of time or 60 days after the end date that's published or that you're purchasing. You can retain so they don't have to be sold. If you decide you're going to retain them, let's just say, for example, in Nebraska, we have a lot of feed. The last couple of years, we've raised a lot of hay. The hay isn't worth a whole lot, so maybe instead of selling them like you normally do in January or December, you decide you're going to want to feed them, you can retain these animals, and you can still, if you have an indemnity due, you can still receive the indemnity. And I'll walk you through how you do that, though. But you don't have to sell them. And you can insure anywhere from 1 to 12,000 head in an endorsement. I'll cover what an endorsement is here in a minute. But one of the nice things about using LRP is there's not a certain number of cattle you have to be protecting. So, for example, when I used to help people with futures and options, an option contract, let's just say, is 70 head, depending on the size of the cattle. Well, you may not want to do a full 70 head. You may want to break it up and do several groups of 20 if you have 100 head. The coverage price that you are quoted off of LRP is determined by the CME feeder cattle contract. So it follows the futures market on any of the futures months you're on or the deferred months. So that's where the quotes are coming from. And you can choose a coverage level of anywhere from 70 to 100% of price. So for example, let's just say for easy math, let's say today it's $300 per hundred weight, the price is, and let's say you wanted to purchase 70% of that, well, you could protect $210 per hundred weight. Now, there's a huge price difference between 100% of price or 70% of price. And the reason is at $210, the odds of you collecting an indemnity is very, very low. The final end price is determined by the cash settled CME feeder cattle index, which is a 7-day average of 700 to 899 pound feeders. So it's an average of those 7 days. It seems to me, I've been watching this for many years. It's a good, accurate index. The LRP can be purchased on days with the U.S. or cannot be purchased on days with the USDA cattle on feed report or a limit move in the CME. All right. I do get a lot of calls, especially when you see a volatile cattle market and you have a limit move, and then people are curious why they can't purchase it. It's once that market limits, the USDA will not allow any purchasing of LRP. And same sort of thing off the cattle on feed report days. So I'm going to touch on the process of what you do when you sign up for LRP or when you want to purchase LRP. It's a two-step process. And the first step is to complete an LRP application, all right? And so I encourage everybody to get this step out of the road. When you fill out an LRP application, it's very similar to like if you've purchased crop insurance before, except you're not really purchasing anything at this point. You're just getting approved to purchase an endorsement. The second process or the second phase of putting protection on is the day you want to put an endorsement on. You can do these together. The challenge is sometimes if there's a hiccup with your FSA forms or something that's limiting your ability to get the application opened, then it may slow it up and you may not get it on that day. So I always tell guys, if you think you may want to purchase this at some point, and there's no commitment to purchasing it, but get an LRP application turned in. That way, the day you say, you know what, I'm ready to put an endorsement on, it's all ready, and you just call up and you put the endorsement on. Some people will have, you always have one application, but you may have 10 endorsements if you make 10 different, if you buy protection 10 different times in a year. So, and the other part of that is you can purchase LRP I put 2 on here. They keep backing it up a little bit, but I'd say more like 3 p.m. It's whenever they publish the quotes is when you can actually start to purchase it. I've seen it earlier than 3, but anymore it's around 3 o'clock, sometimes 2 o'clock. You'll see quotes get posted. And you do have to have that LRP written by 8:25 a.m. in the morning. I had a guy here just a few weeks ago, tried to buy some, and we didn't get it signed till like 8:26 is when the DocuSign got signed on his end. So, and they threw it out because it was less than a minute late. So this has to be done by 8:25 a.m. in the morning. I tell guys, if you think you're going to want to do it, just text me or call me about sometime in the afternoon, 4 or 5 o'clock, even if we can't get it done at that time. That way, at least I'm getting all the documents in place so we can get you the DocuSign before you go to bed or first thing in the morning, get it done for you. Don't wait till about 8:20 to do it because that don't work very well. So I'm going to run through a basic quote for you. See if I can get out of this screen. I want to bring you up a live quote. I guess if this don't work, I can use the example there. I'm going to touch on our website real quick because here's where you can get your quotes if you want to bring quotes up on your own. But there's a lot of good stuff on here. This is insureag.com. You can come here to get all your market data. Down here at the very bottom, you'll see the cash settled index for the feeder cattle contracts. So if you're ever wanting to see how your LRP is closing out based on the index, that price is down there. If you click on any one of these, you can bring up all the different months associated with your feeder cattle. You got all the other ag commodities on there as well. Up under products, if you want to pull up your own LRP quote, you can come in here and just click on LRP prices. I will tell you, a lot of guys just have me, I can send you on a daily basis, send you LRP quotes to your email box. You can just contact me at the end of the presentation to have that set up. There's no cost to it. And I can send you LRP quotes daily into your email box. But if you prefer to pull them up yourself, you can go to the website, click on it, and it'll bring you to the USDA's there we go, the USDA's quoter. So to go through and look at a quote, I'll just run through a real quick one here because this does get a little confusing for people. Click the state you're in. We'll pick feeder cattle. And then here's your different classes that I touched on earlier. Steer weights 1 are from basically 100 to 599 pounds. Steer weight 2s are 600 to 1,000 pounds. Then your heifers repeat the process. And then down here is your unborn bulls and heifers. Don't get confused if you're looking for a regular cow-calf operation and go to unborn calves. That gets a little confusing there. You want unborn bulls and heifers. So we'll bring up unborn bulls and heifers, create the report. And you can see here's all the different quotes. So I'd mentioned you can run from 13 to 52 weeks. And here they all are. Here's the different number of weeks. We'll go down to 52 weeks out and give you an example of what you're looking at. So here's the weeks. Here's the price you can protect today. And if you're buying 100% of price is what this column represents. 100% of price, you can protect $318.100 today. And your cost for that is the total cost is $35.33 per hundred, but your cost after the subsidized rate is $22.97 for protection, and that gets you, that's an end date of next November 16th of 26. All right, so $22.97 per hundred. So on a 5 weight, that'd be roughly $115. And that gets you to November of 16. So that's the LRP quotes. You can always go back and edit the information, choose different categories. Let's see here. Get back into the presentation. If I send them to you automatically in your email box, you'll get something that looks a little more like this, and it'll be laid out a little differently. It's a service I utilize in-house here to send out quotes to people. Once again, if you got your phone or camera handy and you don't want to try and write all that down on what the website is, you can take a snapshot of that with your camera there, and it'll save it to your favorites. Couple other things that you can do within the system here is all your ag market data will be in here on futures and options. I use this a lot just to compare LRP quotes to put options if you're considering put options. It's a great way to compare that as well, because you can pull put option values up. So I guess the next thing I want to touch on is how do you determine when to put LRP on, right? And that's a bit of a marketing question, and it's a hard one to put your finger on. And there's a couple different reasons why where you would want to put LRP on and how you want to determine that. Number one is it profitable for you? Well, I think for a cow-calf operation at these levels, that box gets checked fairly quickly this year. So I would say most years we're utilizing feeder cattle, historical patterns, seasonal patterns to help determine when to put on LRP. This year, I back off a little bit in saying that because here in the last month, there's been a lot of opportunities to go ahead and get LRP put on at some really great values that don't necessarily line up perfectly with seasonals. But if you're sitting there saying, well, I'd like to figure out when is the best time on an annual basis to put on, a lot of times you should be buying some LRP there in February, and then another time over there maybe in July sometime for your November type feeder cattle. So that's what I typically help determine is where a guy wants to try and start putting on some of this. And if you've never looked at a seasonal, it just basically takes the odds of when those seasonal highs come in on the futures market. This is a chart that I subscribe to through more research, and it's the November feeder cattle. Really the pink one is your 30-year seasonal. The red one is your 5-year seasonal, and the black one is your 15-year seasonal. So just doing an overlay of what's the odds of the high coming in during those periods. But that's a good tool to use to help determine when you want to start putting on some protection. Like I said, though, this year a lot of people are just getting protection on because it makes sense. So I want to work through kind of how this works, the economics of LRP, and so today I've mentioned you can purchase. And I'm putting together a hypothetical scenario here. I'm going to do a loss example, meaning there's the price crashed or went lower and you got an indemnity. And I'm going to do an example of if price goes higher from here. So today you got an LRP coverage price of $318.22 is what you can protect from the quote we just brought up. All right. Let's say that we bought that on November 17th on unboard bulls and heifers. All right. And then it expires November 16th of 2026. All right. So let's just say hypothetically next November we got $250 a hundred is what the price is. The only reason I pick that price is because oftentimes markets, after they put in new highs and then you find your elevator shaft lower, you'll try to settle on the old highs from the previous run up, which would be that 240 to 260 area. That's the only reason I came up with 250. Just saying when the party's over and the dust settles, there's a chance that we go back down to the old highs to settle as our new lows or a stopping point at least. So let's just say hypothetically we go to 250. All right. In that case, you protected 318, you ended up at 250 next fall. You would have an indemnity of $68 a hundred in your LRP by purchasing that contract today. The premium you paid, though, if you remember I showed, was $22.97 a hundred. So you have to take that off the total indemnity you got. So your net gain from LRP in that scenario would be $45 a hundred. And then let's say at the same time you sold your cash cattle through Big Iron during that time next year on November 16th, and you sold it, let's say, for $255. All right. You can see the only reason I bumped this up a little over this is because I want to point out the fact that just because the ending value that you got on your LRP is 250, that doesn't mean that's what you got necessarily out of your cash cattle. Those are two different functions. This is the 7-day moving average for the week. This for the nation, this is what you got out of your local out of your selling it to directly to your buyer through Big Iron or through whatever auction you chose to work through. So, and oftentimes people in Nebraska and in Kansas and these Midwest states here actually have a bit of a benefit when they come to LRP, because LRP is based on the cash cattle, and typically we have a little stronger basis, a little stronger cash price in these areas than some of your more southern, southeastern states. So so you do get a little bit of an advantage when it comes to the LRP on that. So let's just say you sold it for $255 plus your $45 gain on your net gain on your LRP. That gave you a net price on those cattle of $300, basically. All right. And so that's how it protects you from downside market movements. Let's say the market went higher. Let's say you didn't need the protection. And let's say today you bought it at 318. Let's say the market skyrockets again and you end up next November at 400. You got no indemnity payment on your LRP, but you still get stuck with the premium because you bought the stuff. So your loss from the LRP is $22.97. You sold your cash cattle for $5 over what the ending value was here. Same scenario as before. That's $405 less your $22.97. Your net selling price on those feeders is $382. So it doesn't matter if this goes up to $450 or $500. The only thing you're missing out on is the $22.97. The LRP is just getting a floor price put into there. So if there is an indemnity due, there will be a couple things you're going to need to provide, or I should say for sure one, and that is proof that you had ownership of these cattle. All right, so most often after the sale is done, people provide me with just a snapshot or forward me a photo of their bill of sale from their cattle. The other thing guys can send me if they decide to retain them and feed them, they can just have a written statement from a third party like a vet or a feed supplier. Anybody like that can send a statement, just a written out statement that says, John Doe has 100 head of feeder calves, 50% of them are heifers, 50% of them are steers, whatever, and then sign and date it. And that's just a verification that the cattle, that you still have the cattle. So, and guys also oftentimes use their balance sheet. So if you've got the cattle in inventory on your balance sheet, let's say you got fed cattle or something that you've been feeding and they're on a balance sheet, even a balance sheet from a bank will work as proof that you have ownership of these cattle. So one of the things that we are working on doing with Big Iron is aligning the LRP end dates with some auction dates. So we're gonna do our best to give you guys the opportunity to treat this as close as possible to an actual hedge on your operation. We oftentimes we'll see guys that'll have LRP for an end date of, let's just say November 16th, but their auction barn that they usually take their cattle to maybe weren't going to have a sale till December 1st or something. So you're a couple weeks away, or sometimes 3 weeks away, and so you have that slippage in there. It isn't a perfect hedge. Our goal is we want to work with you one-on-one to try and align your LRP end dates as well as we can to the end date or to the auction dates. And these were some predetermined auction dates that Big Iron's going to have this coming year, and we just threw a couple of them up here to kind of give an example. But this March 3rd is a 13 week out. If you remember, 13 weeks out is the closest LRP that you can purchase. So let's just say if you were to purchase LRP by December 2nd, between now and December 2nd, that would be good for a March 3rd auction through Big Iron. The other dates we're looking at, as I mentioned, we're really focusing on those unborns. And so we're looking farther out there to October 6th, November 3rd, and December 1st. If you're interested in aligning your LRP with these dates out there, just contact me, go to our website, hit the contact us page, or give me a call at 402-659-1130. That's 402-659-1130, and text me or call me, and I'll reach out to you, and we'll establish a good strategy to make sure your end dates end up on these auction dates. So
Very good, Mark.
that's about it, Patrick. I guess I just want to thank you and Dr. Peel for letting me be part of this, and I hope you guys gained some information on this. And anything I didn't answer, just contact me, and I'll help you work through it. So
sounds great. We'll appreciate it, and we'll just jump right into Dr. Peel's information. I will just in a recap with Mark. We've worked together for a lot of years on a lot of different types of marketing strategies, and we didn't get into a lot of detail, but there are some very unique and creative things you can do with the LRP, and the basic thing we wanted to throw out is try and make it a true hedge and align it with a cash sale at the time that LRP comes due. So we're going to be working on not only those dates, but we'll have a lot of flexibility and can work with Mark. You can call me if you've got questions. And throughout the year, whether it's on old crop calves that are, getting backgrounded right now, or as we get into the new crop, and this thing gets exciting again, going into that July, August seasonal, and you want to do something, we can look out in that time frame out to a deferred delivery and get something done as well. So thanks, Mark, again. Appreciate it, and we'll make sure we get your contact out to everybody. So with that, Dr. Peel, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you get started with your presentation. And you'll have to unmute yourself. Let's see. There we go.
I can.
There you go. I think you got it.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All righty. Yeah, you bet. We'll jump in this right quick. Thanks again for the opportunity to be a part of this tonight. The information that Mark just shared is really a really important key to this. So I'm going to go through some of the cattle market fundamentals that we're looking at. Obviously, it's been a bit of a roller coaster here lately, which really highlights the fact that we need to keep in mind risk management strategies, even when we're in a very strong and a bullish type market. And so we'll come back to that and emphasize that point at the end if I don't forget. So, these first few slides are just a quick rundown of what markets have been doing. These are Southern Plains basis, but they're not going to be a lot different no matter where you are. So calf prices, we've been on a strong run this year that's continued from last year. I'll put these in a longer historical perspective here in just a minute. So again, that's calf prices. Now you can see on the far right-hand side, what's happened here lately. We've had a pretty strong correction, and I'm going to call it that, really driven by external information and headlines in the market that have impacted markets, both cash and futures. But again, the market is still well above year-ago levels. The fundamentals have not changed. Next slide, Mark, or Pat, excuse me. So feeder cattle. Same story. Actually, the big feeder cattle have probably taken the biggest hit in the last month or 5 weeks of all of these markets with all of the stuff that's gone on. That's probably been the biggest point of impact in this. So, those markets, they have not bounced back yet. I think they will if we can just kind of let things quiet down a little bit, let some of the turbulence that's out there swirling around settle down a little bit. Again, the market is still fundamentally strong. We're getting close to the holiday season, so it may be a little bit of a grind to get these markets recovered fully because we'll start seeing holiday disruptions here pretty quick, but the market is still very strong. Next slide. So, five market Fed cattle price, same story. Again, we've been on a strong run. We've spent almost all year generally with record high prices continually. We've been kind of flat here over the last 2 or 3 months at a very high level for the most part. And again, we'll talk about where we go from here. This just kind of sets the stage. Next slide. This one's probably really important perspective for the overall outlook in this market. Now, obviously, on the far right-hand side is where we are now. You can see the run-up we've had. It started really in late 2022 and has been pretty continuous, although we've had a couple of other setbacks along the way that have been temporary in nature. And of course, the question on everybody's mind as you look at the right-hand side of that is, are we at or near the top, and what comes after that? And so we'll talk about that a little bit. There's a couple things about this chart that are important. One is the other bump on that chart to the left side or to the left third of it is what happened about a decade ago. This was the last time we had at that time record high prices, and the setup was somewhat similar to what it is today, although there's some very important differences. In 2014, going into 2014, we had low cattle inventories, exaggerated by a drought, and that set up again what were record high prices at that time. It lasted about 2 years, and then there was a pretty hard backside to it. And I think that's a big part of what producers' expectations have been built on up to this point. We've already had a longer period of high prices this time, and I'm going to suggest that there's some very fundamental differences this time compared to the last time. But that's clearly what's on people's minds, and understandably so. A couple of other quick points about this. No, let's stay on that slide for just a second.
Yep.
A couple of other points about this. One is just a reminder to people that you look at the blue line as calf prices, the green line is feeder cattle, red line is fed cattle. So and we can put more weight classes of feeder cattle on here, but the general point is that these prices do all generally move together. Over time, they're certainly going to go up and down together. But the other thing you see if you look closely at it at any point in time is they certainly don't do it in perfect harmony. They don't move in a fixed fashion. I always tell producers that cattle prices are not they're not linked together by a stick or even a chain. They're tied together by a bungee cord. There's a lot of dynamics in the relationship across these prices, and that becomes really important when you look at the different sectors of this economy or this industry. The cow-calf sector is the focus of the market right now because of where we are. We'll get into the cattle cycle numbers in just a second, but the market's focused there. But the thing to keep in mind is that everybody above the cow-calf level is a margin operation of some kind. Everybody above the cow-calf level is buying and selling different weight classes of feeder cattle, or fed cattle, and it really goes all the way to the final consumer. Packers, further processors, retailers all operate off of a buy-sell margin of some kind. And what this graph really illustrates is that whenever prices go up, those lines get farther apart, which means that the buy-sell margins above the cow-calf level are getting trickier. They're getting less favorable. It means that the input side of those buy-sell margins is going up farther and faster than the output side is. So from the blue line to the green line, that would be a stocker backgrounding kind of a margin. From green to red would be a feedlot type margin, and so on. So your approach and your feelings about the market situation we're in now are going to depend on exactly what your role is in this industry. Next slide. The last class, just as a survey here, is just a reminder of what these cull cow prices are worth. And so they've continued to go up for the last 4 years. In fact, we've seen a bigger change in the cull cow market and ultimately in the meat related to the cull cow market than in any other market up to this point in time. So that's just, again, that's kind of a look at where we are. Next slide. So, the reason we're here, of course, is the cattle cycle, but not only just the cattle cycle, but in fact, this cattle cycle low on the far right-hand side, this is the July one, which is the last inventory data that we have gotten. We didn't get it last year. The report was not issued, but the July 1 beef cow inventory this year was the smallest in the history of this particular data series, which goes back to 1973. We'll talk about the January 1 numbers a little bit later. That goes back much farther. And of course, the previous low was in 2014. Again, you can see that there. Both of these lows were cyclical lows, but they were exaggerated by drought conditions. But again, between the last one and this time, it's by very different drought conditions. And that becomes really important when we think about where we go from here. And obviously, we're trying to figure out where we put in a cyclical low in these inventories and think about the process then of rebuilding this herd. Next slide. That rebuilding will come from replacement heifers. And so again, the far right-hand side shows the inventory of beef replacement heifers for this particular data series was the smallest in the history of that data series. And so we don't have a very large supply of replacement heifers. That means that there will be challenges going forward in trying to rebuild this herd because we simply do not have a pipeline of heifers. Next slide. From the rest of the inventory categories, or a number of the other inventory categories, we calculate an estimated feeder supply. Again, same story on the far right-hand side. This feeder supply inventory is very small. In fact, the U.S. calf crop peaked in this cattle cycle in 2018 and has gotten smaller each of the last 7 years. The projected cattle on feed, or the projected calf crop, total calf crop for the U.S. In this mid-year inventory report would be the smallest calf crop in the U.S. since 1941. So, again, feeder supplies have been getting continually tighter. And so, again, the market obviously is beginning to reflect that more and more as time goes on. Next slide. So, I'm not going to talk much about drought conditions, but right now, next slide. There we go, drought map. We have it was drought that got us here over the last several years. Really, the drought from 2021 through early 2025 moved around the country, and pretty much everybody in beef cattle country, at least in the heart of beef cattle country, had a turn in the barrel. And that's important because it sort of did, rove around. 1 year it was worse in the northern plains, and then it was in the central plains and more in the southern plains, a little bit more to the west, a little bit more to the east. But everybody's had a turn in that. And that means that the financial implications, the stress to the forage resources, as well as to the producers and the operations, was much more broad-based this time. This is a big contrast to what happened 10 years ago. The drought conditions that caused the low in 2014 were heavily dominated in the southern plains, and the northern half of the country actually did not experience most of that drought. And they continued to behave under different market signals that were very important to the way the cattle cycle played out from a rebuilding standpoint than what we have now. Next slide. Just a bit on corn price. Obviously, I don't have to tell anybody in this audience probably that corn prices are low. Next slide. But, from a cattle standpoint, what that's translated into is a significant advantage over time to feedlots in terms of cost of gain. It also affects other supplemental feed prices for folks out in the country. And this is Kansas feedlot data. Your cost of gain in the Midwest will be generally lower than this, but the pattern is going to be the same. We've had we're harvesting a record corn crop now. This is the third big crop in a row. And so we've had a lot of advantage there in terms of cost of gain. Feedlots have enjoyed that. And feedlots, I mentioned those margin challenges earlier. Feedlots have actually done pretty well up to this point. For two reasons. One is this cost of gain has really helped a lot in terms of offsetting some of the margin challenges. Let's go to the next slide. That margin is very wide. This is just the current difference between feeder and fed cattle prices. But the thing is, this is at one point in time. And, of course, feedlots have the advantage in the fact that as the market has trended higher over the last 3 years, by the time lag between when they buy and when they sell gives them a lot of opportunity to improve the net margin that occurs between those two time periods. And so that's helped a lot up till now. That may not continue as much going forward. We'll get to price expectations a little bit later, but I think the pace of price increase in this market is likely to slow down a little bit in the coming months. That's going to make those feedlot margin challenges become a little more, a little more tricky. And the other problem is there's simply not very many feeder cattle. They're very expensive. The ones that you do find, feedlots are scrambling to find numbers, and that's going to get harder and harder for them to maintain capacity. Next slide. So, cattle on feed data is a couple months old now. We're supposed to get a cattle on feed report this Friday that will hopefully catch us up to where we are now. But one of the things that's been a hallmark of this cycle is the fact that it's been very slow to see the cattle on feed inventories come down, even though we know feeder supplies have continued to tighten. Next slide. And so you look at these, the blue line here is the actual monthly cattle on feed numbers. They're very seasonal. So you get that pattern on here. But if you take the seasonality out and look at it as a trend or an average, the green line shows you that, consistent with the calf crop peaking in 2018, cattle on feed inventories on average peaked in late 2022 and started declining. But for about the last 2 years, on the far right-hand side of this graph, they have stayed pretty steady. And we have not seen feedlot inventories come down, even though feeder supplies have continued to tighten. And there's a couple of reasons. Obviously, feedlots are trying to maintain inventories. They have an incentive to do that. And so they want to be able to do that, but their ability to do that depends on a couple things. Next slide. One of those, this chart actually shows that while the inventory has stayed fairly steady for the last couple of years, the blue line is average placements, the red line is average feedlot marketings. They have, in fact, been declining. So what that means is that feedlots are actually running less cattle through the system, if you will, even though they've maintained the inventory. The way I like to explain it is that think of the feedlot as a water tank. And the cattle on feed inventory is the level of the tank at any point in time. But placements are a pipe coming in, and marketings are a pipe going out. And even if there's less water coming in the input pipe, you can keep the tank full if you also slow down the rate of outflow in the output tank and the marketing side. And that's basically what's been going on. Feedlots have slowed down the turnover rate in feedlots. That allows them to keep the inventory full, keeps the feed mill humming, but there's actually less product moving through that whole system. Next slide. There's a couple of reasons why that's happened. One is that we've continued to feed heifers up to this point. And I would contrast where we are now. Now, again, we're behind on this data by a quarter. We did not get the October update of this. Hopefully, we'll get it this week. But we've still been running above average heifers on feed inventory. If you look over to that low point, about a third of the way from the right-hand side, that's how low the heifer percentage got about 10 years ago, which is consistent. That's the flip side of retaining heifers for herd rebuilding. So we have not done that up to this point. And so that's another reason why feedlots have been able to stay full. Next slide. The other reason why they have done that is they've simply added days on feed. And, there's all kinds of reasons why that is. The market generally is providing incentives to feed these cattle to heavier weights. Feedlots have that incentive. Packers actually have an incentive to let them do it up to a point. And as feeder cattle supplies get tighter, feedlots are placing a bigger percentage of lighter weight cattle. So they're lighter coming in, they're heavier going out. For all of those reasons, days on feed has gone up. Now, this Kansas data shows that trend has changed a little bit in just the last few months. So maybe we're seeing that come back a little bit from the peak we had about the beginning of the year as far as an average there. So again, as we go forward, I think the upshot of all of this, we will probably start retaining some heifers here at some point. We may be pulling back a little bit on these average days on feed. All of those things would suggest that we're going to see feedlot inventories tighten up substantially faster and more in the coming months than they have over the last 18 to 24 months. Next slide. Obviously, if you keep cattle in the feedlot longer, you've slowed down the turnover rate, but you're making them all bigger. And so carcass weights have jumped. Again, we're about 6 weeks out of date on this weekly data. Hopefully the data starts flowing again with this week, and we will, at least over time, catch up with where we are in these things. So we've had bigger carcass weights. Last year, next slide. What happened last year was that the second to the right-hand column for 23 to 24 change was that fed cattle slaughter actually was consistent. So steer plus heifer slaughter was unchanged. Carcass weights are bigger, so we actually produce more fed beef. If you think of steers and heifers producing the fed part of our beef production, cow slaughter was down. So the non-fed beef part of our beef production was down. And the net of all of that was that beef production was steady last year. It held steady. So far, again, up to the point where the data stopped flowing in September, steer and heifer slaughter was down about 5%. Cow slaughter continues to be down on a year-over-year basis. And so if you go to the next slide, if you look in the middle of this slide, that green section is our current estimate for 2025. We've got beef production down about 4 to 4.5% for year-over-year change in that. You can see in that kind of orangey section that last year beef production was flat. It really didn't change on net. But we do expect decreasing beef production in 2025, and not on this table, but I expect to see a 4+% or 4 plus or minus percent at least decrease in beef production in 2026 and in 2027 going forward. So the tightest supplies are still ahead of us here, and we'll talk a little bit about why that is going forward. The other point I'd make here, I'm not going to talk a lot about demand other than to say demand has been phenomenal for beef. Obviously, we've got very strong supply fundamentals driving the market, but that depends on and is conditioned on having demand to match that. We've had extremely robust demand. And you know, the fact of the matter is there's lots of alternative proteins out there that consumers could turn to. They have not. The spreads between the retail prices of beef to pork and poultry has continued to widen. Next slide shows the wholesale values for box beef cutout. Again, well above a year ago. You know, there's some volatility in here, and some of that's just seasonal movement. But in general, we've had very strong wholesale beef values. Next slide. And retail prices have continued to move to record levels continuously. And so, you know, again, we've enjoyed very strong demand. Don't see that changing at this point. We keep watching it. But at this point in time, barring some very catastrophic external factor in the economy, macroeconomic or something like that, I don't see any change in beef demand coming forward that would limit the potential of this market in general. Next slide. Just a couple slides on the trade situation. In some ways, we haven't talked about it a lot, and in some ways, we've talked a lot about it in the last month, most of that coming from the political side. This was January through July, which is the last trade data we actually got. Again, we're missing about 2 months worth of data here at this point. And it has been declining compared to the last 3 years. We expected that as we got into this period of tight supplies, higher prices. But the one really big impact you see here is that China-Hong Kong section, sort of light blue up towards the top, was the one that dropped the most for 2025. And that was clearly a result of the trade war, if you will, between the president and China. And so we would have been talking about that a lot more. China was our third largest beef market for the last several years. It dropped to about sixth place early this year after the tariffs went on. And so, you know, we would be talking about that more if we did not have so much other strength in our domestic market that's been kind of overwhelming those impacts at this point. Next slide. You know, conversely, it works almost the opposite for beef imports. As our beef production falls, and in particular, as our non-fed beef production falls, I talked about cow slaughter being down. Beef cow slaughter in 2025 is down about 40% from where it was at the peak in 2022. So we've seen a dramatic decrease in that non-fed supplies. Those are the lean trimmings that we use primarily to support our ground beef market. And we always supplement domestic production because we simply don't produce enough of those lean trimmings. We always supplement that with some imported beef, but we're using that to a much greater extent right now. And again, there's a lot we don't know about the situation right now. Brazil and Australia were the two biggest sources of beef imports through July. Brazil was actually the biggest by a little bit, but then right after that, we have additional tariffs put on Brazil, and we don't have any data to show for August, September, what impact those tariffs had. And now we've sort of reduced tariffs on really all of these countries that had the additional 10% tariff. Apparently, that's been taken off now. So there's going to be some dynamics in these numbers over the next few months. But the bottom line is we are and we need to import these additional supplies of lean beef to help support our ground beef market. I guess I'd make one other quick comment, and just in case the question comes up, a lot of this volatility over the last 5 or 6 weeks started with the president talking about importing more beef from Argentina. If you look on this chart and you look for Argentina, you won't find it. It's on the 2025 bar, or all of these really. It's about 1/3 of the other category at the very top. So the Argentina thing was really not much of a significant issue as far as the overall trade picture, but it highlights the fact that we've just had a lot of talk and discussion and rhetoric and speculation about what might happen in these markets. Next slide. I need to talk a little bit about the Mexican border. That's a part of the issue. This is the history. If you go back for about 20 or 30 years, we've gotten historically about 1.1 to 1.2 million head of Mexican feeder cattle a year. That's about 3.3% of our calf crop. So it's not insignificant, but it's not a major part of it. But that's been there for a long time. We've had cattle trade with Mexico going all the way back to the Civil War in various ways. Next slide. Of course, things changed last year when screwworm, New World screwworm was discovered in Mexico. So the dotted line shows that we closed the border initially just about a year ago in November last year, right before Thanksgiving. And then put some new protocols in place, opened the border in the solid blue line in February, started getting back closer to normal monthly flows of cattle coming in, closed the door again in early May. And other than that brief blip in July, the border's been closed since then. Currently, there's a lot of speculation that we might see the border open again sometime reasonably soon. It's all political decisions at this point, so it's who's to say at this point. But the market is jittery about the potential for Mexican cattle coming in. I don't think there's necessarily as many cattle backed up. There are some cattle backed up in Mexico, but more importantly, if we open the border, particularly at this late date in the year with holidays coming up, I think we would get very few cattle, maybe just a few thousand head across the border before the end of the year. And it would be as we went into the first half or maybe most of next year before those flows would redevelop, assuming that we get this thing to a point where the border stays open consistently going forward. Next slide. I'm going to get back to the last few slides here and talk about the cattle cycle. This really emphasizes that the beef cow herd, the yellow shaded areas on this chart are cyclical expansions. So, if we look at 2014 low, we had an expansion to 2019. Here we are on the far right-hand side with maybe 2025 being the low. We don't know that yet. I think there's a decent chance that 2026 might be just fractionally higher than 25, making January 1 of 25 the official low. But if it is, it won't be by very much. The best we can have done at this point is stabilize the herd. But the real question is what does it take to put together a herd expansion like what happened from 2014 to 2019? Go to the next slide, please. And it's not a secret. Everybody knows that, two things have to happen. The red line shows cow culling. So that's the beef cow slaughter we've been talking about. Cow culling goes down to a minimum level when we're trying to rebuild the herd. We screen those cows a lot harder in that case, So one particular producer might cull a cow because she comes in open or she's late bred and doesn't fit the herd anymore, whatever. But somebody else in this kind of a market typically buys them and we'll take them and get that calf or try to get a calf out of them. And so we're screening those cows much more. The other thing that has to happen that really puts together the herd growth is heifer retention has to go up. That's the blue line here. So in 2015, 16, 17, heifer retention went up to record levels. Cow culling went to minimum levels. And those are the two ingredients you have to put together herd expansion. On the far right-hand side, you can see where we're at now. Cow culling has dropped enough that we could stabilize the herd at the current level. Okay. That dotted portion is a projection for where we are this year. We're down low enough that, again, even with a fairly small inventory replacement heifers, we could probably stabilize the herd at the current low level. But we cannot grow the herd until that blue line turns up and goes up in terms of the percentage of heifer retention. And that simply has not happened on an annual basis. Again, we won't get a direct measure until we get the January 1, 2026 numbers, but the indications are at this point in time in 2025 that we have not started much heifer retention across the country. Anecdotally, some producers indicate they're doing some, but it does not seem to be consistent and widespread enough at this point to really make me think that as an industry, we're really trying that heifer retention. So think about where we are. We have emptied the heifer pipeline the last few years, and that's the difference in part between now and what happened in 2014 to 2019. If you look at that blue line over there, prior to 2014, that heifer retention line was already going up for 2 to 3 years prior to the low and the beginning of herd expansion. That's the difference in the drought impacts a decade ago, where the northern part of the country was actually saving heifers even before we bottomed out the herd inventory and started regrowing. This time, everybody's had drought impacts, and we've continued to draw down the heifer inventory. That's the far right-hand side of that blue line. And so we don't have a pipeline of heifers to work with. So we're really starting from scratch. We're starting from an empty bucket here. If we save a heifer calf here in the next month, so we can call it a 2025 retention, we save a heifer calf this year, we can breed her in 26. She calves in 27. By the time that calf is weaned and goes through the feedlot, we're talking 2028 into 2029 before that turns into any real change in beef production. And so what that suggests is that, we're going to be in fundamentally tight supplies and for much of the rest of the decade. And so there's just not much you can do to change that timeline. And so that's been one of the stories here lately with all of the political rhetoric about beef prices too high and the need to change things is the fact that nobody can really change that. We're in a hole. It took several years to get into this situation, and the nature of beef production is that you simply can't get out of it very fast. Next slide. So it's going to be a slower process. It's already been slower. We could have seen the beginnings of herd expansion even as early as late 2023, but certainly in 2024, we did not see that. And so, we got to rebuild these female numbers. Drought is not really a limiting factor right now, I don't think, in most places. But in some cases, it hasn't been very long since we did have drought that was a limiting factor. In some cases, folks are still recovering from that drought. There was lots more financial recovery needed this time. Much of that may be kind of done at this point, but still, it has slowed down the process. Next slide. Oh, there's all my picture. Okay, here we go. So, bottom line is that the market is really focused on the cow-calf level, trying to incentivize that process of herd rebuilding, so heifer retention and the cow culling part of that. We've got, these are generalized return series, but we've got very strong returns for 2025, for 2026, probably for 2027 at this point. As we go forward, we're looking at very, very strong cow-calf returns. And again, the process by which that will eventually lead to increased production and lower prices is going to be a much slower process this time. Next slide. I don't remember if no, okay. So, so here we are. This is probably the one everybody wanted to see more than anything else. At this point in time, even with everything that's happened the last month and all the volatility we've had, my price forecast, my general outlook has not changed. We do expect to see, on average, higher prices in 2026 and probably through 2027 at a minimum at this point. Maybe at a slower pace. I mentioned that earlier. But I do think we're going to continue to grind higher. The tightest feeder cattle supplies, even though they've continued to tighten for the last several years, but the tightest supplies won't happen until after we start some heifer retention. And based on history, I would say that you would not expect the peak prices for this cattle cycle, if you will, or this price cycle to occur until about a year to a year and a half after we start heifer retention in some significant way. So I don't think we've done that yet. I don't think the highest prices certainly aren't in place now. They're looking higher in 2026 and very likely through 2027 at this point, just given that we have seen such a slow start. So compared to previous cattle cycles, the 2014 to 2019 one was a historically fast one. The one we're in right now is a historically slow one. And I think it's going to play out over a much longer timeline. I generally expect to see elevated prices through much of the rest of the decade with some sort of a gentle top somewhere in there. At this point in time, I don't see a hard break. I don't see a spike top in this thing. We're building toward it much more slowly. And I think that probably means it's going to take longer and it's going to be a more sustainable growth as we go forward. Next slide. So we've said all of these other things. There's a few stats there, but I want to go back to the bottom bullet there that's in bold. And this takes us all the way back to Mark's presentation earlier. Yes, I am still bullish on the market. I do think we have higher prices ahead of us on average. But to his point, and what I would emphasize to producers is you don't sell on average prices for the whole year. You sell certain kinds of animals, be it calves or feeder cattle or fed cattle, whatever, at specific points in time. You know what your production plans are. You know what your marketing windows coming up are. And given the volatility we've seen lately, it really highlights the fact that you do need to do risk management to protect those marketing windows, because it doesn't really matter what the annual average is if you get caught in these short run kinds of volatility that can be really devastating for you. And flexibility, most of these things are pretty short lived. Depends on the nature of them, but most of them are, because the fundamentals are still so robust and so strong. So maybe flexibility, you can outweight some of them, but the risk management tools that are available in terms of the LRP insurance or other insurance type tools that you might have access to, or using futures potentially can be very, very critical in this. The volatility has clearly gone up, and that's just a function of high prices. Markets get nervous when we're at record high prices, so they're much more sensitive to things that cause short-term volatility. I think that's the last slide. Mark, you want to, or Pat, I keep calling you Mark. You want to go one more slide?
You bet.
That's got my contact information on it. I do write a weekly newsletter, which if you're interested, you can click on that code and we'll be happy to put you on that list. We don't sell anything. It's just information we put out here from OSU between myself and some animal science colleagues of mine.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Peel. Really, really appreciate your time and insight into these markets, as you mentioned, and we're all seeing really unprecedented times in the cattle market. A lot of unknowns potentially in the future of how high this thing can get. How high can we bear this market to get? And I guess we'll open it up for some questions. And if you all want to type in the chat, we can open it up for some questions. I guess to start it off, Dr. Peel, I've got a question for you. With some of the social media rhetoric, it seems like news travels so fast anymore, between the news media, the social media, and when the administration was having some conversation here 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, about bringing in some meat from Argentina, and there was some whiplash, probably from some, rightfully so, from some producers. Um, a lot of questions and some feedback that have come back and forth from a lot of folks that I've been reading is, really, are we getting to that point where prices are too high? Or can you give us an idea of what the consumer is saying? Because it seems like we're moving through this product, and with hamburger from $7 to $8 to $9 per pound and on the East and West Coast, we don't see a drop off on the demand from the average consumer. And it seems like also a lot of the comments has been since the COVID time frame. A lot of people started eating at home and finding ways to cook different types of proteins at home, and they've enjoyed it and they've continued to do it. But do you have any good read, and can you share with the group? You know, do you feel like we're getting to a limit on tapping into the demand, that we're getting to too high of a price for the consumer?
I think you summarized a number of issues very well, Pat, there with those comments. And the short answer is no. If you look at it at this point in time, it looks to me like demand is working fine, because I mentioned earlier, there's lots of alternative proteins out there. Beef prices have continued to increase relative to those proteins. So that tells me that while consumers could switch away from beef, there's plenty of opportunity to do that. They have not done that. So I don't think we have a demand problem, if you will, or a limitation there. Now, one of the things you have to keep in mind is, going forward, with beef production falling in 2025 and probably for the next 2 years after that, there's going to be less beef. So some people are going to eat less beef, and the market's way of rationing a tight supply is through higher prices. That's typically the
Right.
way markets work. So, we're going to find out who wants it the most. That's the way markets work. But at the same time, anybody that wants it will continue to get it, and the price will be there. So I don't think we have a demand issue at this point in time. But certainly it has received a lot of attention. Again, from a political standpoint.
Yeah, right. Very good. Very good. Great. Uh, I'll open it up to the group, and anybody can raise their hand or unmute themselves, or type in the chat room, and I can relay it to Dr. Peel or to Mark, on utilizing LRP and risk management in your portfolio. Anybody with any questions? I'll keep an eye on the chat room here. Um, One of the questions that I wrote down, just from a couple producers that I do see are on here, and I'll answer for them, because I don't think they wanted to, or I'll ask the question for them. They didn't want to ask it. Is heifer retention, and you covered this pretty hard, but it's interesting as I travel across the western states of Wyoming, Colorado, Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas, and this part of the beef country. There's the average rancher is a little concerned. Are we gonna get the moisture? It was dry 2 years ago, a year ago. It was really dry in all of this country, in Kansas, Colorado, Wyoming, Western Dakotas, up until April, May of this year. And then we got consistent rains all summer and fall. And what we have had discussions with a lot of these ranches are are you going to retain more than normal? Most of them are telling me not. We don't know what kind of year we're going to have next year. We had good grass. We'll have enough to graze through the winter. But I have had, interestingly enough, some new groups come out and say, "Hey, we're looking to develop 1,000 heifers or 15 heifers that have never done it before." We've got some old Coca-Colas of heifer development that started in the 90s, like the O'Hares up in Ainsworth. And they've really struggled to go out and buy heifers last year and this year. So they've cut, their numbers in half. I've got a guy in our backyard that normally develops 1,000 every year. And this year, last year, he was hesitant and maybe brought on 600 to 700 heifers that are bred this summer. And now he's, at these levels, really questioning, can I buy a $2,300 to $2,500 heifer? When last year I was debating whether I should buy a $16 to $18 heifer. So, are you getting any more feeling? Are we really starting to see some major moves with heifer retention on last year's crop that we're breeding, or this crop of calves right now that got weaned?
Yeah, it's again, it's hard to have consistent feelings at this point. I think it is quite variable among producers, certainly, and to some extent, perhaps regionally as well. But the heifer inventory data that we have going back to January 1 of this year, that January 1 inventory includes two sets of heifers, right? In fact, USDA breaks it out. So they break out a subset of the total inventory into the ones that are expected to calve. So those are the 2-year-old bred heifers that are going to calve in the coming year. And what's left then are presumably heifers that are in development that we're going to breed. And the fact of the matter is, coming into 2025, both of those categories were record low, basically.
Right.
And so we don't have enough heifers, again, in the current pipeline to do anything more than stabilize the herd in 2025 and 2026, I think, at this point. If we start with new crop heifer calves, then we're setting the stage for potential growth in 27 or 28 or beyond. But I don't think we have enough heifers in the pipeline right now to do much of any growth, no matter what we decide to do for the next through 2026 at least.
Yeah, right. Good point. Yeah, and at this summer, at the prices we were at, and then coming into the fall with this thing continuing to move higher, there was a lot of more than 50% of the ranchers we talked to said, "Well, I'm not going to hold that back any more than I need to. We're going to sell at these levels. I can't afford not to." So I would agree with that. Here's an interesting question for you that came from the audience. Cooper asks, Alan Nation talks a bit about the cattle cycle in his book, Knowledge Rich Ranching. In that segment, he talks a little about the bred cattle market lagging the feeder cattle market by about a year. From Daryl's perspective and experience, is this something that is true, or do you feel like this may happen within our next expansion?
I've not looked at it that way, so that's the first thing, I guess. So I'm just going to give you a very general reaction at this point. I haven't tried to look at it that way. That's probably a little bit consistent. I'm trying to think here. I guess I would expect probably that bred cow prices do lag feeder cattle prices a little bit, just because, again, it takes time for producers to sort of shape their expectations as feeder cattle prices change, and then begin to act on those. So that doesn't seem like a big surprise to me. I have not tried to do any analysis in terms of exactly how those might be correlated. Again, from the standpoint of the overall feeder supply and price levels, I mentioned this earlier. It would seem that we would expect to see probably the peak in feeder cattle prices to occur something on the order of a year and a half after we start heifer retention. And
Right.
so, and again, as we just said, we don't have any real convincing evidence yet that we've started. If we have, it's, I think, at a pretty low level. Now, again, with the data disruptions that we've had for the last month, that could change, I guess, once we catch up on the slaughter data and the heifer on feed number. But I really don't think it's going to change it all that much. It just looks to me like we're not, as an industry, really engaged in a lot of heifer retention here in 2025.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Very good. Great. Any more questions for Dr. Peel or for Mark on risk management? Before I let you all go, I will share with you and show you in the chat room. I shared a link with all of you. If you would take a moment to click on this link, there are 5 basic questions and some interesting questions with some interesting outcomes I think we'll all be interested in that I will share with everyone that participated, including do you think the highs are in? We know where Dr. Peel's at with his answer. Do you feel like we're starting to see some heifer retention? Are you retaining heifers in your operation? Are you retaining any more than normal? And a couple other good questions out there I think might be of interest to all of you. So please take a moment to click on that in the chat room. Any other questions before I let everybody go for the night? Okay. I don't see any typed in here. Mark, Dr. Peel, we're going to let you off easy here. I think everybody enjoyed it. Thank you both for
Yeah.
taking the time. And to all of you, a majority of the folks that I noticed coming on are in the cow calf industry. We've got a handful that are also running yearlings that have been on the presentation, and we're trying to do this to help be more informative and give you guys some answers at your fingertips, something to take home and utilize, to think on, to have further discussions. And so, again, thanks everyone for taking the time out tonight to participate. We'll be doing this again next quarter in the first quarter of the new year of 26. And with that, I'll let you all go. Mark Frank, thank you. And Dr. Peel, thank you. I'll be following up with both of you here very soon, and you guys have a good Thanksgiving if I don't talk to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks guys. Y'all have a good night.